Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20, joining me for another week that was for the Parramatta Eels and the NRL, my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, we've got a signing, we've got new coaches, we've got, it's not just expansion, we're talking about revamps of competitions. It's all happening in the code. But as always, let's check in of how you're both doing. And as always, I start with you, Sixties. How you doing, mate?
Well, mate, apart from dealing with global warming right now, busting out the shorts and T-shirts and putting some of the tracksuit pants away, not too bad. I mean, we're getting to the end. You can feel it.
Oh, yeah.
That, we're getting to the end of the season from hell. It's felt like it's gone on forever. I mean, probably once the season's over, we'll be on a countdown till next year starting. But I don't know about you, but I'm feeling it now. I'm really feeling it. But I should mention a couple of things before I go on and we hear from Clint. Our usual shout out to sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. They've been part of standing by us and standing by the Eels in this really rough season. And also, we're at our final Leagues Club appearance for the year, John. So Parra League's the home of the Eels. We're there on Saturday. Now, please remember this for this week because it's a 3:00 Saturday afternoon kickoff in the NRL. We're actually in the club, in the bistro with our preview podcast at midday, 12 p.m. Now, it looks like John Muggleton will be our special guest for that. We're on so that we can present our podcast and give everyone time to head over for the kickoff for the NRLW match against the Dragons. And, of course, then that's followed on by the Eels match in the NRL against the Dragons. So looking forward to seeing you all there. We've had a great crew of regulars that have been turning up in the bistro to listen to the legends every week. And, of course, I'm not referring to us as the legends. I'm talking about the legend players. But, look, it's been another great season. And, John, I know that you also feel privileged, as I do, in being down there at the Leagues Club and chatting with such great people. I mean, never mind that they were great players, but just such great people. And another season is just about wrapped up in that regard as well.
Yes, indeed. It's bittersweet, isn't it? We've had such a fantastic ride at the bistro this year, talking to all those legends. And it's not just about the current day, of the game. It's about their tactics and insights and their connections to other people in the rich fabric of rugby league. So it's been very special this year to participate in that. And like you said, it's got to come to an end. And perhaps that's for the best given how the season's gone. But a massive thanks to both Parra Leagues and all the legends for their time this year. It's been very, very cool.
Absolutely. So, Clint, time to check in with you, mate. You're dealing with the hot weather.
Yeah, I'm surviving, gents. But to be perfectly honest, it's a welcome change given how our years unfolded, and we are almost at the end, as he said, 60s, and I say that begrudgingly, almost happily so. You mentioned a few times throughout the year I've looked rather forlorn and almost despondent and non-emotional in the grandstand this year, and that's largely because I've seen where we were going to end very early on. The recognition of the pattern that was unfolding before our eyes kind of just felt like, with everything, even halfway through the year, still half the year ahead of us at that point, it was always going to kind of end up where it has. So, kind of looking forward to getting to the end of it, but I do so excitingly with our last home game this weekend, because I get to bring my niece along to her first ever NRL game, and she doesn't know it yet. It's a surprise. So I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Let's just hope she's not one of the millions of listeners of the podcast.
Yes, we have to hope.
Surprise!
We have to hope. Absolutely. Look, if she messages us, Clint, for some reason, we'll let you know. Okay, so you have to change how you plan around that.
Given that she's only 10 years old, her mother keeps her very rightly so safely protected from devices and listen to our three mugs. Us three mugs go at it every week. So well done to her for doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
But she does get to enjoy our company on the Saturday at least.
Well, that sounds good, mate. Sounds good. John, let's get this show on the road.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, let's kick things off with the news that broke as we were recording our preview podcast towards the end of the week last week on the Thursday morning. And, of course, we didn't get to talk with you about that, Clint, but, of course, that's the signing of Isaiah Iongi. Clint, I may as well throw to you first of all. What's your take on the Eels picking up Iongi? Where do you think he'll be playing, and what sort of strengths do you think he'll bring to the club?
Well, it's a great opportunistic signing. I really like the length of the deal being a 3-year deal. Obviously, with Blaze going over to Penrith, we had to fire a shot in the marketplace for a successor for Gutherson. A medium long-term successor for Clint Gutherson. We've done that in Isaiah Iongi. I really like what I've seen from his highlights across the New South Wales Cup, and I've been a keen observer when sort of whispers of him of his signing eventuating sort of surface over the last 3 or 4 weeks. He seems to move across the field quite effortlessly. He had a very solid debut for Penrith, running for well over 200 meters, and he's one and only NRL appearance in his career to date. But the thing that impressed me is he has a nice bit of pace when changing direction, which in the modern format of rugby league is quite a powerful tool to have in your attacking kit. Likewise, he seems to have a pretty solid pass on him, and additionally, at least from what we saw in his NRL appearance, some rather solid defense, it seems, at the back. His tackle efficiency for a fullback is uncharacteristically high for a position that is usually only making tackles as the last line of defense one-on-one. So I think in terms of the bones, the skeleton of a player, he's got a really good pedigree. He's got something certainly for us to work with, and some exciting attributes for us to rightly be excited about for the future. But I think for the time being, given that he's only played the one NRL game, he's not going to suddenly jump into playing 24 plus NRL games at fullback. I dare say that there will be a Anthony Minicello, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck-esque apprenticeship that happens with Clint Gutherson next year, with a view over the next year or two for him to be the natural successor there at fullback.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the way that they might go about it. I guess what we will find out is how they prepare him for the season during the preseason, and whether he alternates between different positions, or if he ends up spending the entirety of the preseason at fullback. I guess if he ends up spending the entirety of the preseason at fullback, it might be a pretty strong indicator about what their intentions are. And that, of course, would be a bold move going, because if he spends that time at fullback during the preseason, I would expect at the same time that we'd see Gutherson preparing in a different position. So if those two things happen together, I might give you the quiet word, Clint. I mightn't be able to say it out loud to everyone. They might like to keep that to themselves, but I might give you a bit of a quiet word on it. John, anything you want to add to Clint's take on Iongi?
No way. It's a really solid take for a really solid signing. As we discussed in the previous podcast, anyone that was upset by this signing, very shaky foundations to be, having any sort of issue with it. Good young talent. we talked about the Canberra Raiders earlier this year, 60s, and being jealous of their recruitment, targeting young guys that were talented, either stuck behind other people at their club in the likes of Ethan Sanders, or just straight up good recruiting in general. And yeah, this is exactly that. Iongi's got a rep mainstay ahead of him in Dylan Edwards, 3-time premiership winner, Clive Churchill winner, Origin fullback, Kangaroo last tour. He's not getting into that back line in his preferred position, and even then, they've gone out and signed Blaise Talangi, which sort of has added congestion to that back line. So Eels been opportunistic, went out and got a good young kid, and he has a real chance now to stick as our number one, and it's going to be really fun to watch his journey because, like you said, Quint, you look at those numbers in Cup and they're really encouraging. On the weekend, I think he went 200 metres, 7 tackle busts, a try assist, and that's closer to the norm than it isn't for him in reserve grade. So really, really strong foundations there.
So, rather than being able to go out and recruit someone who is a star player currently in the NRL, and I guess you have that's something that we've already done for next season in picking up Lomax in a current Origin player, but supporters would have naturally been looking for the Eels to continue to be in the player market. It's a market that doesn't have a great deal out there openly looking for a change of clubs right now. There's not what you'd say a great deal of star power on the open market. So I put him down as in the category of a Jermaine Hopgood in that regard, in that the Eels have picked someone who is standing out in the New South Wales Cup, as you said, stuck behind someone and potentially stuck behind someone for a while and looking for an opportunity to play regular first grade. And that's what we were able to offer for Jermaine Hopgood. And obviously we've gone to a club that has perhaps more of those types of players than other clubs in the Penrith Panthers, and that's resulted in the signing of Iongi. So, yeah, it's a very encouraging signing, and obviously we need a few more to go that way, and we'll talk a little bit about maybe some rumours at the moment that are happening. We won't dive too deep into it because we're not really a rumour website or podcast. So, but we will just touch on a couple of things. Fellas, because the other thing that was confirmed, but it was something that was already known, and I think we'd already discussed Nathan Brown's appointment to the Eels. John, I'm pretty sure that we've covered that in a recent podcast.
We have.
The Eels have confirmed Nathan Brown's appointment as I think the senior assistant coach. Scott Wisemantle, who is a former rugby league player, actually played lower grades with the Eels, and then has gone into a career in coaching in rugby union. Sam Moa, who is, of course, a renowned former NRL and Super League player, played in the Roosters when they won the competition in 2013. Hard man, renowned for his defence and coming in as a defence coach. And Blair Mills, who will be the head of athletic performance at the Eels. And he's coming in with a union background, being part of the All Blacks system, been part of the setup at the Waikato Chiefs and in Japanese rugby. And if anyone's had a chance, you can catch some videos out there with Blair Mills talking about the role of, that sort of specialist in head of athletic performance and how they go about meeting the coaching and the team's needs in that field. So it's interesting to have a listen to his philosophies and how he goes about his business. So, look, John, it's pretty hard to fault the appointments that have been made. Of course, they've also confirmed that Nathan Kalis will be the New South Wales Cup coach again next year. But it's hard to fault that. And of course, we were so pleased that Nathan Brown had returned to the club in this role, specifically because of how well received he was by Pathways players and Pathways staff during his time at the club. And if you're looking for that something unifying, something that will have the players, really able to identify with someone who they found a good communicator, someone who was provided not just good performance advice, but also, just a bit of general life advice as well, that Nathan Brown certainly seemed to fill that role from our experience in interacting with some of the players.
Yeah, exactly, mate. It's on the macro level, on the whole, it's very hard to poke any holes in this set of assistant coaches and support staff. And, that's not to say that they can't, or won't have their faults, because I don't think any coaching staff is perfect when it comes to managing all the different threads that go into a NRL team. But this is exciting. We've got some different perspectives coming in, a very heavy dose of rugby union, and that's not a bad thing. I know that leagues like to clown on their elder brother when it comes to, at least domestically, the Australian code, but we're getting someone in Mills, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, Mills, who comes from a very strong pedigree. The Chiefs are a very good franchise. And so between that and his history, and I believe rugby sevens, we're getting a pretty cool difference on perhaps our approach to athletic conditioning and everything that goes into that. And look, the Eels have had a colourful history with out of code conditioners when we went with the AFL Star Influence 1 year, and that didn't work so well. But I think that there's obviously a lot more in common between league and union, and I'm really keen to see what he can bring, what Wiseman to and Moa can bring. Moa's been part of that La Catalan setup, who have been, I think, top 3, top 4 for the last 3 or 4 years, including a minor premiership. And in that time, I think their defense, at least on points aggregate, has been 3rd or 4th every year. So not the best defense in a given year, but being consistently good. And that's what the Eels want, is consistency. So really keen to see how these guys gel with their, obviously the one that we haven't actually seen in person yet, even though he's operating behind the scenes, in Jason Ryles. So really keen to see all this start to come together in the preseason.
Yeah, and of course the other thing that we should mention at this point is that all the other Eels staff that they're replacing, they have managed to secure jobs, NRL positions with other clubs. So we would thank them for their time at the Eels, and also congratulating them on getting the appointments that they've had. And look, I'm not too sure how well it's known out there, but it didn't take too long for them to secure new positions. So as I said, congratulations to them, and thanks to them as well for their service over the years to the Eels. Clint, anything you want to add about the staff?
There's a lot of excitement in the unknown. I think John summarised it all quite well there. But ultimately, there's excitement here because change is afoot, and it's obviously rightly or wrongly been decided that we're going in a different direction, and it'd be interesting to see what direction we end up in. You ask anyone in the fan base and any rugby league pundit over the last probably 5-10 years. There's a big correlation between being a top 4 defensive side and winning the premiership, and that's obviously a big area for us to improve in. And these coaching appointments seem to suggest that we are going to be strongly focused in that area. So it would be interesting to see how that translates into our preseason and subsequently our season in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course we should mention as well, Brad had that extension of his contract over there at Leeds and is probably strongly rumoured to get the Western Australia gig when that's all confirmed. But anyway, we'll see what happens there. Oh, mate, we've talked already about this long season and what we've gone through as supporters. And what do you know? This weekend's the member appreciation round. Do we deserve medals this year? Has that been struck for us when we come into the ground this weekend? Look, I think there was one of the other matches last weekend had a member appreciation round, and the fans were out there on the stadium turf at the end of the game, and I believe that's the plan as well at the end of the match this week, Clint. So your niece might be able to get out there on the field itself after the game and have a bit of a walk around on the grass and look at the stadium from a different perspective.
Not a bad first day experience, huh?
Not a bad first day experience at all. And they've also got, I think there's a special celebration for all of those people who've been able to attend every home game this season. So any member who has attended every home game this season, you should have received an email inviting you to apply to be part of I think a lap of honour or something similar before the game as people who've attended every home game this season. So no medal struck, but a little bit of an honour for those people who are members or people that have fronted up to every game this year as members. Moving on, John, one of the great initiatives last year was the Great Aussie Boot Swap, where I believe there was something like $12,000 worth of boots that were made available for young players who'd outgrown their old boots to be able to size up to the next size for the upcoming season. And it's on again. They've got the first stage of donating the boots this week at the home game. So I think there's going to be some stations there, or at least one station where people can drop the used boots in. So I think the Junior League is getting close to wrapping up their normal rounds. So it's an opportunity for people whose kids have outgrown their boots to donate them. And there'll be, when we come into the start of next season, as there was last year, there'll be boots that'll be available for kids to come in and do a bit of a swap with their old boots, and it's a way that there's less wastage, I guess, with old football boots, because if they've only had 1 year of wear, which is not unusual for young kids to outgrow their boots in a year, and if they've got no younger brothers or sisters to hand the boots down to, they get a life the next year. They get to be worn by someone else, and it helps to keep the cost down, doesn't it, of kids playing footy? So let's bear that in mind again. So you people can go out and drop their boots in this week. I did mention earlier that we were going to talk about some rumours. There was a little bit more noise about another outside back this week in Wilson from the Bulldogs. Look, I don't know specifically whether that's going to come to fruition, but boys, what's your expectations? Because the way that I see it is that the club is after outside backs. The club is after backup halves, players who can play in the spine, maybe in a utility type role. Is that your expectations? Do you think they're going to look to sign forwards, or do you think they're happy with the forwards that are in the system, either in the full-time squad or the players that are coming up through the pathways, that they're not going to look for forwards from outside the Eels?
Yeah, we have obviously a desperate need for outside backs. We have a need for spine depth. And I want to hope so that at least internally we can handle most of our forward requirements. Assuming that you keep the likes of Charlie Geimer, Saxon Pryke, Sam Torvidi, Jock Brazel, is a couple other guys there too. I think you can get not all of them going to come here and be stars. That's not how it works. But I think they can at least provide augmentation to the guys that got here. And I know that we've rumoured to have tapped quite a few guys on the shoulder, but as it stands right now, I think the only player that we're really looking at leaving, at least right now, is Reagan Campbell-Gillard. And I think Brent Reid reported that the Dragons have all but locked that in now, that would be a pretty significant block of out of the way for the Eels in terms of getting these guys like Wilson, and I think Dean Hawkins is another name that's been linked to us, into the fold. So, yeah, I think that in terms of our external recruitment, it's going to focus heavily on backs. It's going to focus on maybe halves/utilities, because I think Dejan, we talked about it earlier, but he's been linked to the English Super League. We've lost Ethan Sanders. We've lost Matt Arthur. Brendan Hands is having a good season at dummy half. I think he'll be the guy moving forwards for Jason Ryles, especially in year one. After that, obviously, maybe there's differences, but I think he's going to get the first crack at it. But we need depth. So, yeah, I think the prime amount of resources when it comes to just signing players externally should go towards that back line and towards those utility or depth options in the spine.
Yeah, look, I think you've nailed that. I'm reasonably buoyant that they'll secure Hawkins from the Rabbitohs. I think they will. As you mentioned, that Brendan Hands is probably going to be the number one choice dummy half for next season. It's my understanding that Ryles is a big fan of his, and it then becomes how do you back him up? I think
Riley Smith's doing a good job in flag, but I think you still need a bridge. You need a bridge option in terms of someone with a bit of NRL experience that can just step into the breach. Because if Hands goes down, I mean, I know we still have Joey Lussick too right now, but he's another player subject to rumours of a potential departure. So if Lussick is still here, then I suppose that helps. He can, he hasn't had the greatest season, but he's still an NRL experienced option. But I think we'll find him still at the club next year, John. At this stage, that's the mail that I'm getting, is that he's probably still locked in the plans. In terms of the rising option, well, yes, you've got Riley Smith that's there. I think the club would like to get someone in that 14 role. There was a little bit of noise that was floating around about a certain Canterbury player that could play in a number of positions from the back line through to in that dummy half role. But whether that comes to fruition, look, I don't know. But yeah, I guess probably if I was to get a comment here from Clint, you were really bullish about that the club would be making a mistake in getting rid of Reagan Campbell-Gillard because, you believe he still has plenty to offer, but it does look as if he's now going to be on the move. And I mean, how do you feel about it if they actually don't go into the market for a middle forward, that they rely on players who are already there or players that are in the pathways to fill the breach?
One of the caveats that I framed that position with is that we need to be able to recreate Reagan Campbell-Gillard's output in the aggregate. And you can do that with outside backs. We've seen Penrith successfully use the model of outside backs getting involved and creating the meters and marching the team down the field so that they had a fresh forward pack ready to channel a lot of their efforts into defence. So, I mean, if we're making this move, and it seems like we are, it has to be predicated on the fact that we can recreate Reg's meter game from our back line. If that is, or somewhere else in the field, doesn't have to exclusively be the back line. We just need to find 150, 160 meters extra per game, and replicate over 90% tackle efficiency. If we can do that or do better than that, then we can do that cheaper and across a couple more players, then power to the club. They've effectively made a good decision. My position on this particular matter is predicated on the fact that I think it's going to be difficult to do that. But
Wilson's a good fit though. He's not. I want to say he's not a flashy player. He's not a Addo Carr or a Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow in terms of outright speed. But you look at his contributions to the Bulldogs this year. He's played he's been part of 2 games.
About 10 games or something.
Yeah, 2 games where he didn't actually get the play because I think he was on the bench. But he's got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He went under 100 metres one time against the Knights, 92 metres. Every other game after that is closer to the 200 than it is pretty much. 148 against us, 160, 146, 229 against us the second time around, 121, 164, 261 against the Warriors recently, 124, 168 metres. So he is productive on the ground. He has a good work rate. And he's still relatively young. If what's he's a 21, 22, I think. So he's not,
So he's got upside, and his stat line there reads incredibly well. But that's just one facet of the game, and there's also the unspoken aspects of having that, I guess, forward enforcer, and to me they're an important part of super competitive teams. Someone who's got that presence that the opposition fear. I think for us that is Regan Campbell-Gillard, and I think that that's also a key characteristic, along with the stat line that we potentially lose there. So I want the opposition to be fearing cutting it up the middle, because they know that they might have to face Reg with after a bottle of Angry Pills has been taken. It's. I acknowledge I might be making some points from an emotional position here, in addition to the statistical argument that I put forward. It'd just be a damn shame to lose someone like him, because you'd like to think that we could get someone of Wilson's caliber in addition to keeping someone like Reg, but unfortunately that's just not the way that it's been cut right now. So we kind of have to make do with what we got and deal with the position we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and fellas, we're just going to wrap things up with general Eels news before we start to look at Team List Tuesday and do a quick wrap of the total weekend results for the Eels. And it's on a sad note, because we just recently had the passing of Eels player number 403, John Bilbiger. Now, John was a little bit before the time of you two fellas. He was he played with the Eels in 82 and 83. His was quite an interesting story, because when he debuted for the Balmain Tigers, not when he debuted, but his parents found out that he was playing for the Balmain Tigers when they just happened to be watching a game on the television and he was playing in the game. And that was the first that they knew that he was playing rugby league. As far as they were aware, he was playing soccer, and he'd moved out of home when he was younger. And there he is on the television, and he had a little bit of explaining to do to his Serbian immigrant parents that he was playing, instead of playing soccer, he was actually playing this savage game called rugby league.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but then his story gets really interesting, because he played with Parramatta in 80. He moved from the Tigers to the Eels in 82, 83. He only got one first grade game across those 2 years for the Eels, which gave him his player number. And then he went back to the local A grade competition, I think, playing in the Parramatta area. I think it was Marylands that he played for. And he did that for a couple of years, and then ended up playing with Souths and Wests for 3 years. And that's when he picked up the majority of his first grade appearances. So he ended up retiring with 49 first grade appearances to his name. So I guess a bit like those players who debut late in life after playing Ron Massey Cup or Sydney Shield for a period of time. He actually had a sojourn back in the local league and then re-established himself again as a first grade footballer. I don't know that you would ever get someone doing that sort of path in football again. I think it's probably a reflection of years gone by, but certainly an interesting journey that he had. Of course, the other thing too, which was a measure of that it being a different time, was that he was a back rower. And of course, when you talked about back rowers, then you'd be talking about the second row and the lock. And he was all of 86 kilograms as a back rower. Now, 86 kilograms is probably a standard weight for a half.
Yeah.
You probably have 5/8 that are much bigger than 86 kilograms in some instances. So, the back rowers back in those days, they weren't all giants, and 86 kgs. So, unfortunately, John was also part of that era in rugby league that, as they've got to their older years now, are suffering from dementia, and that was what ended up taking him in making his last few years quite tough. And we certainly send out our sympathies to John's loved ones, and be it family or friends. And just remember him always as Eels player number 403. Okay, John, Team List Tuesday.
Yes.
Mate, can you take us through an Eels lineup that is, I think, basically only got, one change.
And strictly speaking, unchanged from last Team List Tuesday. It was just the late withdrawal of Luca Moretti that caused a different team sheet to take on the Brisbane Broncos. You mentioned it's Members Appreciation Round, and in the NRL, it means that it's pretty much the former Team List Tuesday officially, but one change from the actual field team that took on the Broncos. So Gufferson at fullback, Sivo and Russell on the flanks, Penasini and Talangi in the centres. Going to need a bit of a better defensive effort from our backline against the Dragons. But you got Dillbags and Dejan Arce in the halves. Reagan Campbell-Gillard, who we just spoke about, starting in the front row. Sean Lane, Brendan Hands at dummy half. Kel Matualangi, Bryce Cartwright on the edges. Joe Fangahi starting lock forward. Interchange, Lussick, Makatoa, Moretti and Keir. Extended roster, Tungle, Dury, Sanders, Harper, Ogden. Wyatt Raymond, the man at the whistle. Matt Noyan in the box. Pretty much as per program, assuming that Luca has overcome that quadriceps injury, and probably brings a lot better balance to our bench, given that Jake Tungle isn't likely to see the field unless there's an injury to the back line.
Yeah. Look, probably not too much to say in that regard. We'll probably have everything that we want to say in the preview podcast. Clint, anything you want to dive into with the team list?
I don't want to target anyone too harshly here, but at the same time, I think there's an elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. And the last couple of weeks, Lace Talangi's defence has left a little to be desired. The effort that led to the first Brisbane try, I think it might have even been the second Brisbane try, where he didn't put his shoulder in and kind of just went shirt grabbing. To be perfectly honest, it's not what we need in this battle to avoid the spoon right now. And it's those type of efforts that unfortunately really swing the momentum. And the quality of the team as such is so diminished and so deteriorated that those decisions in the moment are actually huge momentum swinging moments against our side. And obviously we're down on troops, and our lack of available options in the backline has been well documented throughout the course of this year. But I'd be giving serious consideration to whether we continue with Blaze in the centres for the next 2 games.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks like there's going to be no change there. Would you have considered Morgan Harper as the centre option, or would you have gone into different direction?
Look, he's the natural fit at this point, and someone with a little bit more NRL experience. It's been a long year for Blaze, and a lot of things have happened for him. He's had some highs and he's had some lows, and the fact of the matter is he's also departing the club at season's end. I'm not trying to hang a young fella out to dry, but just as we sort of mentioned with Isaiah only coming along next year, 20 plus games at NRL in your first year is a tall order and a big ask, and I think he's just starting to see and feel some of the effects of having played in the top grade for that many games in his first year. Ideally, and all things managed well, he probably only gets a sprinkle of first grade at best this year. But that's not the position that we're in. I think we need to take a club first mentality here, how we approach these things, and look at who is possibly the best defensive option for the next couple of games. And I would, at this particular point in time, probably put Morgan Harper ahead of Blaze.
You know what? It could also be argued, Clint, that you would maybe be having the best interest of Blaze in mind in not selecting him in first grade if the initial plan was not to use him in
absolutely
many games. Now, I mean, you could say, well, we don't have to consider that now because he won't be part of the club moving forward. But the other perspective for look, there's been people, and you haven't done this in this instance. You've just made a reality call about where Blaze is at as a young player, and there's been a lot of harsh calls about Blaze on social media. Like there was actually one comment that I deleted from someone on TCT this week in response to our instant reaction podcast, and I just thought, no, that's really stepping over the mark because it got a little bit personal, and I'm certainly not going to repeat what was said. But the thing that I to put in perspective for people in terms of what's been asked of Blaze this year is that what did Blaze have at the start of the year? What, 2 games in New South Wales Cup, and in the year before that, like last year, he had a handful of games in Jersey Flegg at the end of their season after getting to play a handful of games at the end of the SG Ball season. And prior to that, he was playing Harold Matts. So that will give, if you're talking about inexperience, the fact that he has been able to compete at NRL level with that background coming into this season gives an indication of, the fact that he's a talented young player, but it also, I think, highlights that there's been a lot that was expected of him. And I think if there are supporters like yourself, Clint, that are suggesting, maybe he shouldn't be in first grade now, I think it's a reasonable suggestion. If anything, not just from a team perspective, but in terms of the demands placed on him. But I think, like you said, the options are limited, and maybe the club could have gone down the path of selecting Morgan Harper at centre to take some of that pressure away from Blaze. But and look, even if they didn't want to go down the path of Morgan Harper, they could have easily played Tungor at centre, because Tungor was playing centre in New South Wales Cup just before he was elevated to the NRL. So he was elevated, I think, from centre at New South Wales Cup to wing in the NRL. And he was playing wing as well in the New South Wales Cup, but he also played in the centre position. That could have been an option. John, just very quickly, would you have considered making a change around Blaze this week?
Yeah, it's a tough call.
I didn't expect there would be.
Neither did I. And I mean,
not at all.
We obviously were very critical in the Instant Reaction podcast about some of the efforts there. In particular, when you mentioned, Quint, that the Tristan Saylor try in the first half, where Kelma Tuolungi done such a great job of snuffing out that play by Adam Reynolds to sort of shut it down, only for Blaze to just have terrible positioning and an attempt to wrap up Saylor. Yeah, look, it's a tricky one. I don't think the options behind him are stellar by any means. Morgan Harper, he's clearly out of favour with the coaching staff since he hasn't had a look in for weeks on end now, if not months. Plus, he's been troubled by that knee injury he sustained against the Warriors in Cup going back a few weeks now. But he's probably back to at least a somewhat solid NRL playing capacity, I suppose. But yeah, Tungall's an option too. I don't know, like it's shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. And I know you do want to be sending messages that form is important and how you handle yourself in games is important. I suppose in the long, if you're talking long view, you're helping not burn bridges of Blaze by not, making him the scapegoat, not lighten him up, even though, his form is warranted being dropped. And that's, again, a very, very long view about him and a potential return of the Eels down the road. Given how the season's played out, given the options behind him, like there's not like he's blocking a young kid that's going to come in and benefit from it. I'm pretty lukewarm on it. I can definitely understand why people are getting frustrated. And again, there are standards and messaging that is important here when it comes to squad standards. But at the same time, I just want the season to be over. And if giving us an iota of a better chance of getting Blaze back down the road when he's presumably an NRL star and not burning bridges now is part of it, then I suppose it's potentially a win. But that's a very, 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 very loose connection to make.
Yeah. So, John, now let's jump into the NRLW because I think we've ended up with a change in some respects that we have been expecting.
Yeah. Eels played their worst game of the season against Newcastle in comical circumstances out of Eric Tweedo. I'm sure we can talk about that if you want, but there was some logistical issues. We'll leave it at that. And the team has made a change on the back of that. Nothing outrageous, but we do see Lindsay Tui coming onto the interchange as a outside back option there. Is that going to be subject to further revisions ahead of kickoff when they take on the Dragons? Perhaps, but right now it means an unchanged backline. Church at fullback, Faye and Donovan on the wings. And then the two R's in the centres, Rory Owen and Rosie Kelly. Towie Hiku and Pearson are the halves. The front row is Elsie Albert, Maddie Jones, then Tanaka Todd Hunter at dummy half. One thing I do want to say, boys, the dummy halves have to tighten up their service. It's getting a bit sloppy and it's hurting the Eels. Not the only problem, mind you, but it was a bit on the nose against Newcastle. Back row, Collie Jackson, Mahalia Murphy, the captain, Kennedy Charrington lock forward. Interchange, Lindsay Tui is joined by Rosemary Beckett, Tyler Amiatu, and Jade Fennell, which means Tafoa Asua is a player that drop out. She's joined on the extended roster by Brianna Eels, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis, Chelsea McKira, and Mia Middleton.
Look, I guess the only thing I would postulate now is whether we get a match day change with Lindsay Tui coming into the starting lineup. And, I'm not going to be entirely surprised if she gets a crack at playing on the wing. But I guess we'll soon see. She does have that capacity as someone on the bench that could cover injuries to centre or wing.
And I suppose on the edge in a pinch as well. She runs really hard, so just send her into the defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they've done that at the Harvey Norman level as well with Kate Fallon, who's been alternating between centre and edge in her where she's been selected. But look, apart from that, they've had the opportunity to be selecting the same team every week. We've had Steve Georgalis taking advantage of that, and I think we'll talk about last week's results very shortly, but I think it was a team list to be expected. Anything you want to add, Clint, given that we're about to talk about the weekend's results anyway?
No, look, not really. I'll admit to you boys here. Unfortunately, I missed our NRLW game this weekend past, but by the sounds of the challenges on and off the field, it probably was one worth not seeing out of our games year to date in the NRLW competition. So the good news for the girls is that they get the chance to reset this week, and they had a strong performance in their trial against St. George. So here's hoping they can turn around.
Yep. Okay, John, we move to the New South Wales Cup team list.
Yeah, it's hard to pass how many changes are this week, so I'll just go through the team list. I know that there's at least one debutant here, because I believe Mitch Chester has already played this year. He was a late inclusion 2 weeks ago, maybe, because they had the bye last week.
Yeah, they had a bye last week. He played the week before, so he was a late inclusion with Hunter dropping out.
That's right, Zach Hunter, Matt Hunter. Matt Hunter was named in the halves. That's right. So that was the replacement there. So we start at fullback as always. Lorenzo Molitalo.
It was actually Jake Hunter. I think it was Jake Hunter. Was named in the halves and then dropped back to play fullback. Zach Hunter. Hunter.
Okay. Yeah.
Zach Hunter. Was named in the halves, and then with the injury to Arpa Twiddle, he dropped back to play fullback in Jersey Flegg.
So Lorenzo at fullback, Hayes and Isaac Lumi on the wings, Ethan Martin, Morgan Harper in the centres. You got Zach Sini at 5'8". Hello, there's a change. One to watch, I suppose. Ethan Sanders will partner him there. Very interesting. Reece Alderton and Tony Mattielli to start in the front row. It looks like Tony's running into a bit of form, 60s. Hopefully he can finish the season strongly. Matty Arthur at dummy half. You got Matt Dory and Will Lewis on the edges. Brock Parker at lock forward. We mentioned Mitch Chester. He's going to be one of the utilities on the bench because you've got Paddy Spence there as well. And Yaya Ayachi. It's utility city. Okay. So Chester covers the half. Spence covers the back line and dummy half. And Yaya covers lock and dummy half. So there's one debutant there in Yaya. So well done there. And then another, a little bit more conventional. Seb Piacala comes onto the bench. He's going to be a forward specialist, the only forward specialist on the bench, really. So I wonder if there's going to be some changes to this team list, because right now you're asking a lot of your starting pack. Alderton, Mattielli, Dury, Lewis and Parker going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting against the Dragons.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I guess it's possible, but we've got injury, we've got suspension. And they're not. It looks like they don't want to mess at all with the Jersey flag.
That is clear. That is very clear.
Yeah. Let's just move on now to the Harvey Norman women's team.
Yeah, and it's a bit of not an in-house derby, but Wenty have a loose affiliation with the Eels, it looks like, in this competition, and they take on the Eels, and Wenty have been flying high. Have they registered a loss yet? Let me have a quick gander here. They are still undefeated. Yep. Them alongside not alongside anyone. They've got a stranglehold in this competition right now. I read the Steelers 2 losses as buys. So they are 2 wins clear of second place. So killing it. Not a good sign for our Eels, though. So they look like this, though. Debbie Dwyer back at fullback this week with Yasmin Baker on one wing, Alicia Bell on the other. Lindsay Tui named in the centres, but I imagine there's going to be a replacement there with Aaliyah Hamano, the other centre. Kate Fallon is not in this team. Interesting. So that's not going to be a replacement there. We go to the halves, though. Pahuka Berryman Duff and Sarah Dimmick at 6 and 7. Riche Farmasuli and Lasalio Sita Payne. I think that's probably our strongest in terms of impact pairing of props there. Is that going to be too unbalanced for the team? We'll have to wait and see if having them both on the field is going to be really, really good or maybe create a tempo issue. But they're going to be the bookends for Chelsea Makira. On the back row, though, you got Bella Sanford and Fontaine Tafua on the edges. Rivoli Arlaw at lock forward. So Talisha Maiva has dropped back to the bench. That's where she is. So she's joined there by Ashley Pottinger, Alita Namosi, and Tahila Valoanga. Extended roster just 2 this week, Caitlin Pearden and Rory Mueller. So the Eels looking to tinker with both the back line and the forward pack this week. And I suppose of note, Brianna Eels at lock forward for Wenty, who is obviously NRLW contractor. Also Ruby Jean Keller Ellis on the interchange there. Any other Eels I see in this back line? No, I do see, as we've mentioned before, some pathways players, Danielle Seckold. Who else is there? Aliyah Sufan, and that's it from what I can tell.
Yeah, so look, interesting. As I've mentioned before, I was able to see a little bit of the Wenty team in the pre-season when they were involved in the opposed session with the Eels, NRLW and Harvey Norman women's team, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is a strong team, and I think in the report I mentioned that they provided they were a great opponent to have in the opposed session, considering that they were Harvey Norman level team. So yeah, very, very. They look very strong. They look like they're very well coached. So will be a big ask, and we'll talk about that again in the preview. And now, finally, if you can just quickly run through the Jersey Flegg selections for this week, John, in what unfortunately might be their final game of the season.
I'm just looking at this. I think have they just posted the club has posted the result from the Silktails. I didn't realise that when I was looking at the team as first. The team as post has the round 25 result there. Interesting. Anyway, so quickly going through the team. We needed both a big win against the Silktails. We didn't quite get that. We got the win, but only by plus 16 on the differential. Didn't have all the results go away. So I think technically we'll still win at 60s, but we need 2 results this week. One, I think, is probable with the Bulldogs taking on one of the teams. The other is the Warriors taking on, I think, the Sharks. I think it's Bulldogs, Manly, and then Bulldogs versus either Manly or the Sharks, and then Warriors versus the other. I think the Bulldogs will win one, but the Warriors probably won't win the other. So the team, as they hold out hope against hope here, lines up like this. Zach Hunter at fullback. You got Moe Alamadine and Ollie McCarthy on the wings. Antioch Vitala Marino is back this week. He takes his place in the centres over Michael Abdo. Araz Namva also running in the back line there. Matty Hunter, Josh Lynn in the halves. Sam Tuivasa, Tinkin Brown, the bookends to Riley Smith, a dummy half. Back row, Jock Brazel, Dom Lestrada, Saxon Pryke. Interchange, Max Tupou, Tyrese Lakini, Damascus Nemia, and Ralph Lestrada. So pretty much it's a copy and paste from the team that they've been putting out for a good month plus now. The team that is just continuing to win, but the team that's probably going to be one round short unless they can get a sequence of events outside of their control happening to fall their way on the weekend.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about that shortly. But Clint, I'll just go to you. I mean, do you have any comments that you want to make about the team list? It looks like it's about as strong as they can possibly manage from players that would be eligible to play finals football.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I want to say in relation to this team list and the Jersey Flegg round ahead is, does lightning strike twice?
Well,
we shall soon see.
Look, who knows? I mean, John wasn't hopeful about the Warriors, but I'll remind him that the Warriors beat the Bulldogs 32-16 last week, and they're probably
which is a good scalp to get.
Yeah, and the Warriors. The result that we want is for them to be able to beat the Sharks this week, and the Warriors are travelling, whereas last week they were at home. Who knows, John? They might decide that they want to finish the season with a bang and make a statement. We also do need the Bulldogs to beat Manly, or for us to have a massive victory in our game. But we'll we'll talk about that a little bit more in the preview podcast. But when it's never good when the outcome of the finals isn't entirely in your own hands.
Second year running for flag.
Yeah. So anyway, fellas, that takes us through the team list news. So, John, can you just quickly take us through the weekend wrap, and we'll just give a very quick take on each match to wrap up our Eels news segment for this podcast.
Yeah, so starting with the NRL, Eels went up to Brisbane and ended up copying up a 16-point lead. Very frustrating stuff, going down 30-24 in this one, fellas. Obviously, Sixties and I had our instant reaction. Clint, what are your final takeaways on what I build frustration the game for our instant reaction post?
You just got the sense of when we got to 16-0 that when Clint Gutherson was lining up that kick to make it 18-0, if he kicks this, we might be able to sort of work our way towards another try and get ourselves in a, I won't say unchaseable lead, but certainly the momentum that makes Brisbane drop their heads. But when he didn't, and then we followed up a set or two later with that, I think Gutherson himself even threw an intercept pass to Selwyn Cobbo. You just got the sense of there's the little moment where it gives them a sniff. We touched on Blaze and his effort on Tristan Saylor. You just got the sense that was always coming and that was always going to be there. They weren't going to be able to sustain that effort for 80 minutes, let alone much longer than what they did. But you kind of hope that
Clint, I was going to say, and Clint, and I know how you feel about this because we talked about it at the game against the Panthers when it happened, and we talked about it afterwards. But the early tackle kicks,
yep.
Which it seemed like no one else knew that it was on. It was at a time when the Eels were strangling the Broncos for possession.
They were rolling them downfield.
Yeah.
It just tackle free on halfway.
Continue to build up their load by making them tackle you and keep them going backwards. Don't hand the ball to them and say, look, you can have a turn now.
Yeah.
Because unless we were the sort of team that's going to belt the tripe out of an opposing team,
which we're
not, right? We're not going to belt the tripe out of an opposing team. We need as much possession as we possibly can get. So the fact that we handed over possession and given what had happened in that game against Penrith, where it was an early tackle kick that completely changed the momentum of the game late in the game, lo and behold, we literally allowed them to play themselves back into the game. It's just
absolutely
press. Just press play and repeat. It's just that's what the season's been this year. It's just confusing decisions, confusing footy IQ in that regard. It's just been, you get. Look, the team in terms of effort. I'm not going to fault the team in terms of effort.
No, not at all.
Not at all. I'm not going to fault them. Yeah, I'm not going to fault them in terms of desire or anything like that.
They clearly want to win, but there's just some moments in execution and footy IQ that are really letting them down. And that's an important term that you referenced there, Sixties, because again, this is not me getting personal. This is me talking about the behaviour as opposed to the person. But Kelma Tuolangi's decision to charge down and Adam Reynolds kicks 10 metres out from his own line was a very low footy IQ decision to make in that moment. And it's those little moments that mount up across the course of a game that end up being the game swingers. And they're the types of things that we just can't get wrong. I understand they're under fatigue, and the best of intent is behind that, right? He wants to rush Adam Reynolds, who's already in a difficult position, to hopefully potentially put his kick out on the full. But you know what's the even smarter decision in that moment? just to let him kick it, because he's not going to kick it further than 50 metres on the fly, which means he's only going to get it to hour and 40. By the time Gutherson or Mike Acevo's caught and they've returned it, they're probably back on the opposition 40 with another 4 tackles up our sleeve. And at that particular point in time, which I believe we were leading, at the very least the scores were level. That is the real game and momentum swinger in our favour, not trying to pressure him into potentially kicking the ball out or charging the ball down, which only has the sideline or the dead ball line to go over in that position anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were saying in the instant reaction. And
I've got some strong opinions on the state of the charge down in the modern game as well, but not the time and place for it. But yeah, they love tinkering with pretty much everything that they don't need to. I think maybe the charge down needs a rethink in terms of if we're going to protect kickers so much and make it so you can't touch them, or otherwise it's like, a penalty if not a sin bin. Maybe the charge down shouldn't reset tackle counts.
Yeah, it's you have to wonder these days as well, because the charge down presents its own problems where there is accidental contact that's being made with the legs.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Its value is really diminished. And of course, if we speak as Parramatta supporters, we know that the law of the football universe is that a charge down on a Parramatta kick will bounce straight back to the opposing team. And in that instance, probably would have, had a perfect bounce for, Kilmer. If he was not an Eel, if he was someone else, it would have just bounced up perfectly for him to collect it and dive over the line. Not that I'm saying that any other team would have necessarily gone for a charge down, but, it feels like the universe goes that way with us. And that, I don't remember too many occasions. There might be the odd one or two where we've gone for charge downs and we've ended up with possession at the end of it. It just feels like it's, as John's suggesting, it's a low percentage play.
Mm-hmm.
And what we saw in that instance with Kelmer was he was putting the big effort on. He was looking for the big play, and as you said, you cannot knock the desire, the will, the effort, any of that sort of thing. But it's and we can say this as people that are watching on the couch at home or watching up in the stands, and we've all got our opinions. Every supporter's got their opinions, and we're not out there on the field in those moments, and the people aren't always rational out on the field and thinking through all the possible consequences. That whether that comes down to coaching and players being in the moment constantly, and maybe that's what that differentiates players who are at the elite level or teams that are at the elite level, that they are switched on all the time and they are aware of what can happen in games. They're aware of all the rules and the intricacies around the rules and use them to their effect. But anyway, that's we've probably said more than what we need to say about the NRL result. John, quickly, the NRLW result, and for each of our takes on that.
Yeah, Eels falling to the reigning premiers, 36-16 out at Eric Tweedale Stadium. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we probably didn't handle the delay too well. Our girls looked unsettled, erratic, didn't stick to the game plan that has worked so well for them through the first month of NRLW. Still put in a bit of a fight, tries to Toi Hiku, Murphy and Beckett, made the game close at one point, but then the Knights pulled away in the 60th minutes, with tries to Jones and Upton that helped them take the lead to an unassailable advantage. And yeah, just a very frustrating loss, boys. Game obviously held up logistically by an error getting a qualified, not just a paramedic, but a particularly qualified paramedic on the ground to allow play to then go take place. So you have obviously the medical expertise on hands in case something had gone wrong. The Knights, I don't know if you saw the footage, fellas, but they were bubbly and bouncing around the dressing rooms, seemed to handle the delay in stride. I didn't see any footage of the Eels, but between the way the two teams took to the field in the first half, it was clear that Newcastle handled that break way better and took control of the game as a result, with tries in the second, third, 13th and 19th minute before the Eels even had a chance to get on the board.
Yeah, look, my comment with actually being out there at the ground and witnessing this live is, look, I think the club has would have had some learning around the staging of the game for, a venue that's not normally used as a top grade venue. So there are a lot of logistics that I think they will need to be better with moving forward. But all that aside, there was a lot of excitement at the ground, a lot of anticipation, and maybe that was part of what was difficult for the Eels to handle as well. But the thing that was the stark difference for me in that game was that I think it goes without saying that the Knights played arguably their best football of the season in this game. And as a consequence, they looked like they were, in everything that they did, they looked like they were a metre faster than the Eels team. Every time that they were moving the ball, it was done with, I guess there was precision, but it was like, I'd have to use the word elite athleticism. And that's not suggesting that our girls aren't elite athletes. It was just the Knights team was so switched on and was so in tune with their game. It was so many things went like clockwork for them. And watching them, it was it looked like watching a team that was back-to-back premiers, that they are. And I think that the Eels will get a lot out of that because the Eels weren't on their game this week, but for passages in the game, they were going with the Knights and threatened to come back at them, but just, fell off with a couple of mistakes and just didn't really have quite enough on the day to go, to get the job done. But so I think a learning experience for the team, for the club, and hopefully something that they bounce back well from this week. I think we can probably move on now, John, to the Harvey Norman result last week, because we had a bye with the New South Wales Cup. So again, another loss for the Harvey Norman women's team.
Yeah, as we've talked about, self-inflicted wounds have been really the lesson of this season for them. And to their credit, they played Newcastle pretty close here, 22-12. They went down out of Eric Tweedow, tries the Bella Sanford and Caitlin Pearden here. So they were probably a bit better in terms of their effort after the frustrating loss to the West Tigers and then some of the other losses they've had this year, but still completing only at 64% 60s. It's just not good enough. And they're killing themselves with these mistakes. Yeah,
and look, I wasn't able to stay out there for that game. I had other commitments, so I had to leave immediately after the NRLW game. Otherwise, I would have stayed and completed a live blog of the Harvey Norman game. So I haven't been able to watch any footage of the match, but in going through the play-by-play, you can see when the errors occurred and that they occurred at significant times, i.e. just before scoring plays by the Knights, turning over possession, which obviously allowed the Knights to be able to strike. And, like they were 50% the week before, and you can go, well, 64% is an improvement, but it's still probably about 15 to 20% away from what they would be aiming for to get victories, and especially against the stronger performing teams. They just have to do better in that regard. There's probably not too much more that we can say, given that none of us were there for that game. We're just basically going on some stats and also based on what we've watched in previous weeks. And will be a tough ask playing the Wenny Magpies this week, and we'll talk about that later in the week. Finally, John, we've hinted at it, but the Jersey Flegg were victorious again. They're now sitting at 13 of their last 16 games, but they didn't get near the result that we would have expected against the Silktails.
No, a spirited Kaviti Silktails team really hung in there and ended up posting a couple, not too dissimilar to when they first met earlier this year, posting a few late tries to bring the scoreline in. But even before that, Eels held to just 28 points in this one. And you don't want to, beat your chest and brag that you're going to smash a team, but it was there for the Eels to go out there and get a big win. And they just probably were frustrated into, I don't know if they took it as a given or were sort of turned back by Fiji's very, resilient effort and defense, but restricted to just 28 points with tries to Lynn, Dom Stratus, Tupou, Abdo, and Namva. Matty Hunter 4 from 5 with the tee. They couldn't get the big victory they wanted to close the gap on the Manly Seagulls when it comes to the points differential. So they end the round 21 points behind the Seagulls on points differential. Same amount of wins, so they're equal on points, but they have lost a spot on points in the, for and against, but Cronulla still the half win ahead of them. So coming into this round, they either need, so they can have Manly win, but win by a margin combined with a Parramatta win that would see the Eels leapfrog that 21 points plus whatever Manly score in a win difference in for and against, plus the non-negotiable is Cronulla losing or not drawing, because Cronulla's for and against is outstanding. So they're the permutations for their path to the finals now, and it's looking tough. Because if I just quickly, I'll tell you who's playing who here. Open up another tab quickly and go to this competition. So we have the Bulldogs taking on the Seagulls. So that actually lines up well for Parramatta. Canterbury are one of the form teams of the competition. They have the home ground advantage here, 2v6. But the result that they needed more and more was, is Warriors v Sharks. This one's a home game for Cronulla, taking on the Warriors, who are in 11th place on the ladder. So we need a rousing upset from our brothers across the ditch to get us home here, on top of Parramatta taking care of business against the Dragons.
Yeah, it's a tough ask, and we'll talk more about it in the preview podcast. But look, I don't think this wasn't having watched the game, it wasn't the Eels' best performance in the Jersey Flegg. Bit clunky in attack, a few too many errors, I thought. I don't know whether they thought it was going to happen a little bit easier, but yeah, it was down on their standard, in my opinion. Even though and I'm giving credit to the Silktails as well, that was a spirited performance as you suggested. But I don't think it would have been a game which would have pleased the coaches in any way. And yeah, they've probably left some differential points out on the field, which could have served them well coming into this final round, where perhaps they might have only been relying on one result to go their way.
If Cronulla lose and then the Eels beat the Dragons, only have Manly win against the Bulldogs in a manner that would cut the forward against to raise it in margins and us losing, going to be very upset. Very, very upset.
Yeah. Because they have conceded late tries in a few matches that were well and truly wrapped up, and you don't want them to look back and rue those sorts of moments. But anyway, Clint, I don't know whether you got to watch any of the Flegg contest last week. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, as I said before, gents, does lightning strike twice? You unpacked what appears to be a little bit of a convoluted path to the finals there, but the only thing the boys can control is their own performance. Yes, they left some points out on the field against the Silktails, but you can't be up each and every week, and they've been the form side for the better part, I think, of about the last 3 months of the Flegg competition. So, they continue to find ways to win, even if the Sealtails performance wasn't the most polished. But it's all on the line this week, and it's quite exciting to see how it's going to finish. 2 years in a row, it's coming down to the last round of the season for Flegg to see how their fortunes unfold in terms of finals footy. And if history were to repeat itself, you'd say we go into the finals series the form team of the competition, as we were this time last year, and hopefully with a point to prove against some of these sides that sort of knocked us around in the first 6 to 8 weeks of the competition.
Yeah, it's a shame that a team that is potentially going in to the last round, and where they might end up achieving 14 wins out of their last 17 games, is not going to appear in finals football. But that could end up being the reality of their season. Fellas, we've just made it through the Eels segment of the news podcast, and I think we've gone well past the hour, and it brings us to that point that is everyone's favourite point in the news podcast. John, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, we're just about to close the door or close the books on another season of the NRL. No one cares about the NRL finals. They suck anyway. So not wasting our time with that. But when the door closes on the NRL, a door opens over in America. Preseason just wrapped up for the NFL, so everyone's getting ready. Fantasy drafts are in full flight. I noticed that Quinton Gufferson was on our socials today talking about his first fantasy draft of the season. I think he took Tyreek Hill and Puka Nakua as his first 2 picks there, so he's gone strong on the wide receivers. So to celebrate the impending launch of season 24 to 25, God, time flying by, of the NFL, one of the iconic broadcast soundtracks for the Code, and if you ever watch the game, this one will ring out nice and loud. So it's NFL on Fox this week.
Yeah.
That gets the blood pumping for a bit of American football.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, given that I'm not the American sport enthusiast that you two fellas are, I'll bow down to your better knowledge and appreciation of such theme music. But it makes me think, John, you've had some highlights this year, because you've had a couple of theme music contributions that you've made at this point in the podcast. That's not forgetting that we've got the iconic news theme that's used in our own news team assemble, and with the ABC theme music that comes in there. But we also had that corporate music that was used as well, which was a special request this season. So I think there's something to be said about sampling some theme musics from, be it from television shows or standard corporate events or whatever the case may be. It's I can see you could be a match day DJ with a difference. Yeah. You can add your beats. You can add your fat beats to some corporate or theme
music. Get people bopping to the elevator music.
Really get the crowd pumping, yeah. John. I mean, I think we're going to have a change of DJ at Eels matches next year. We just have to keep that hashtag and campaign going, DJ 4020. So if you're on board with that, people, and you watching and you follow us on the socials, yeah, let's get the DJ 4020 happening.
Hey, if I can interest you in American football, mate, it's 3 a.m., 6 a.m. starts, so you get your coffee nice and early on a Monday morning for the American Sunday. It's a fun way to start the week, although you do end up very fatigued on a Monday. So, it's interesting and an acquired taste. My old man can't stand NFL. I've tried explaining it to him. He's just like, there's too many damn breaks. It takes too long, and I can understand that. But it's if you can get past the stuttering stop-start nature of it, I think it's a fascinating sport in terms of the strategy, the tactics, the similarities and the differences to our code of rugby league. It's such a interesting contrast, and I think it.
Oh,
So you go.
I do want to ask, John. You've said it's a 6 a.m. kickoff, so does that mean their full time is around afternoon tea? Is that when I could if I tune in at 6 a.m.
So if you're watching a 6 a.m. start, so times daylight savings and the east-west coast difference for NFL cause a few irregularities through the season. At some point there'll be a 1 a.m. game, I believe, East Coast daylight savings, or maybe it's the London games that they take there. So there will be some 1 a.m. games on our time scale. But a game roughly takes 3 hours. So if you're watching from the 6 a.m. slot, expect
if I'm watching it at 6 a.m. before breakfast, it will actually be over before lunchtime.
Yes, but if that's one game, their American Sunday is they've got games American Thursday, American Sunday, American Monday, but the Thursday and the Monday are one-off games. Friday and Saturday, are for college football because that's its own monster. But if you were to watch the entire Sunday ticket, you'd be looking to start on a given Sunday, 3 a.m. Australian time, finishing about 3 p.m. because I think the last kickoff is 11 or 12 p.m. depending on daylight savings for the Monday night America's TV slot or whatever it is. Sorry, Sunday night America's TV slot. So it's
all about football.
Yeah.
I tell you what, 40, the immediate thing that came to my head as you were describing that for our listeners is the iconic Simpsons episode where not only George Bush moves across the road from the Simpsons, but after he moves out, Gerald Ford moves in,
yep.
and he invites Homer over to watch the football and eat nachos. I'll spare our listeners the verbal rehash of that, but anyone who's the Simpsons fans, if you know, you know.
Yes, I think that's the best way of leaving it.
So, John, does that mean consuming nachos at 1 a.m. or 6 a.m.?
Oh, no. Usually there's whatever's late. If you're having the late night snacks, it's something a little bit more digestible than nachos. But
and hopefully not with American cheese. That stuff is nasty.
But,
it's nasty.
The Monday mornings, the 6 a.m. starts usually mean a trip to a cafe or Macca's for a coffee, and then maybe a McMuffin or something like that, bacon and cheese or whatever, if you're in the mood. But yeah, the 1 a.m. starts, usually it's just nothing, but they're rare because I think there's only a handful of teams that consistently play at London. The ones that have tried to make it a home away from home. I think Jacksonville, the Jaguars, are one of them. But yeah, most games, I follow a West Coast team, which means a lot of my home games fall in the later slots. So it's a 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 o'clock, or 11 o'clock start, as opposed to those disgusting East Coast teams and their 10 a.m. morning American time starts.
Yeah. So, look, I figure anyway you could do a Macca's run in the time that a review's undertaken anyway. So
the clock in the final 2 minutes of a game is fascinating when they start using timeouts and killing the clock with the sideline and incomplete passes. So 2 minutes goes a long time sometimes in the NFL. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're now going to press forward with our NRL news segment. But what I think we might do, fellas, is absolutely power through the weekend
yes,
wrap.
Please.
Just the really quick results, John. And if there's anything, and if we haven't got any take that we want from the round, so be it. But yeah, let's just power through the results.
Round 25 of the NRL. In summary, Manly Warringah Seagulls, like the Rabbitohs before them, forget how to play football. Lose to the Tigers, 34-26. 3 sin bins. Stephen Crichton, immune from being sin bin. What the hell's the bunker doing? Bulldogs, too good for the Warriors, 34-18. Eels lose to the Broncos. Panthers upset by a very good Canberra Raiders team, blowing open not just the minor premiership, locking that in for the Storm, because they hammered the Dolphins, opening up the top two completely. Roosters and Sharks suddenly now pushing the Panthers down to 4th, I think, on the ladder. Wild stuff. Storm hammered the Dolphins. Knights, too good for the Rabbitohs. Roosters, I went to the park when this game was competitive with my dogs, came back and they were kicking the Titans' ass 48-22. And then in the local derby, Sharks, too good for the Dragons. Round 25 in the books. Big takeaways.
Okay, very simple takeaway. No Nathan Cleary, no premiership for the Panthers. He has to get back. Look, the Eels nearly took the Panthers with Cleary on the field. My big take is he's the only one that will get them through to take another premiership. Otherwise, put a line through him. Clint?
Unsurprisingly, lads, and you may have to get the censor out for me here, John. I don't know whether which side to weigh here, but F you Manly and F you Tigers.
It certainly was a game of football.
Yeah.
NRLW, round 5 in the books. Eels down to the Knights. We talked about that. Cowboys, too good for the Raiders, 28-18. Titans hammered the Roosters. Bit of a surprise result there. The Titans are reigning, not premiers, but grand final team, so not short in quality, but they've had a tough year thus far, or perhaps below expectations. 26-6. Broncos hammered the Tigers 44-14. Cronulla Sharks continue to stretch out their lead on top of the table, 28-4 victors over the Dragons.
Yeah, well, look, I think my main take there is maybe the Tigers don't get a win this season. That's possible. They certainly weren't anywhere near the team that played us the week before. Maybe that's people might say, well, that's a measure of the difference between the Eels and the Roosters. But as far as I'm concerned, I think they had their grand final, as we suspected, the week before the Tigers. And apart from that, hey, what about the melee in the Titans and Roosters game?
There's a bit of fieriness in the NRLW that you just don't see in the NRL these days, and I suppose because it's still in its foundational, moments. A bit of fire and brimstone that goes out there. I don't mind. I know that you talk about the message it sends to young kids and whatnot. You don't. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't mind seeing the fire and the brimstone. And in a way, the NRL might be better to get all the grubby bullshit out if some of the enforcers could enforce in that way. But again, it is important to send a message about fair play and sportsmanship to young men and young women of our game. So yeah, it's difficult juggling it, but I'm not going to lie, it was great to see.
Yeah, Clint?
Look, nothing more to add, gents. I said to you before, I missed the NRLW coverage this week, but I agree with the take about the Tigers. It looks like it's going to be hard going for them this year, despite how competitive they were against us the week before.
Yep. Okay, fellas, we move on. Latrell Mitchell certainly getting lots of headlines, lots of media attention today. Bit of debate on 360, plenty of debate on the radio about it. He's come out and I don't know if you'd say it was an admission without being an admission, where he said he regrets being someone that's made a poor decision, but not too much more of that. And I guess it's to be expected that he's not going to answer specifics to the media in general about what were you actually doing in that photo, Latrell. He would have had to have answered the South Sydney club. I guess, fellas, that the debate here is, firstly, the media expectations that he's going to speak to them realistic. Secondly, did the South Sydney club handle what they knew was going to be a media scrum around him on leaving his meeting with them? Did they handle that well? Thirdly, as far as Latrell is concerned, should he be apologising to supporters of his club, to his club, to the NRL? I mean, what's your takes across the board on this? John, I'll throw to you first.
Yeah, look, he hasn't been caught red-handed insofar as, it's a failed drug test, or he's, literally in the action of partaking in the use of illicit substances, literally snorting it or whatnot. It's just a terrible look for the game, and he's not the only one to have done it. I think Val Holmes most recently comes to mind, but I think our own Sean Lane had an incident with a silly picture in a not too dissimilar context, and it's just I will continue to die on this hill about just use some freaking common sense if you're going to do something silly like that. I know that that's a bit of an oxymoron, doing something silly using common sense, but come on, In terms of how the codes handle it, it's been a bit of like just if we don't talk about it, it will go away for the most part. And I know that the media's sort of banged the drums on it for a bit, but it's lost a lot of momentum, a lot of energy. Like there isn't a rabble or a mob calling for him to be stood down for weeks on end. So I don't know. I'm over it. I wish that the NRL would come down with the hammer on these guys when they do something stupid like this, because it does hurt the game's image. It does promote less than ideal behaviour. We talk about setting standards for the young kids, and I know a lot of his athletes don't want to be role models, but it is part and parcel of the territory that comes when you make that much money.
It's the burden of the position.
And exactly, it is a mantle of responsibility that comes with the pay grade, with the exposure. And I'm not asking you to be a saint, a perfect person, the quintessential good Samaritan. I'm just asking you to stop being an idiot. That is my stance on it. You can do dumb things. You can do illegal things. Just separate that from your public profile. Don't have phones when you're doing that sort of thing. Like, come on.
And Clint, the RLPA and the contractual situations for players and how the NRL has to handle various types of breaches, does that complicate things even more?
Yeah, absolutely, because it opens up the very convenient path of plausible deniability. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately why this hasn't gone anywhere, and why everyone just hopes that it becomes a nothing thing. And much of the points John was making on the matter is that you'd wish that the NRL and the governing body would deal with this type of stuff swiftly, but the RLPA's stance on these things, and no in-season drug testing unless it's scheduled drug testing, means that there is an out for players that even when caught red-handed with what looks and suggests to be certain substances,
alleged,
it means that there will always be an out. Which is why we sort of saw the cheeky response, I guess, from Latrell when queried about that by the media. So, it's always going to be murky when that's the case. I kind of think that there is probable cause for testing to take place when these types of photos are taken. But I'm not the lawmaker or the rule maker or the policy maker on these things. I'm just a fan with an opinion who I think like all of us here, we like to not necessarily see them as the pinnacle of society, as John was alluding to, but just not be idiots, because it's a poor look for the young followers of our game.
I had a bit of a discussion with Yoko on this as we started to watch 360 tonight, and it was interesting because she doesn't think that he owes any apologies to supporters for anything that he might do in his private life, and that
if it impacts your playing life, then yeah, I disagree with her there. Like,
and that the media are also in a position where they make some of these players almost bigger than the game or bigger than their jersey, so that they are in the position where they drag.
Yeah, tall poppy syndrome. That is true. Yeah.
Yes, but again, it's also, that's an occupational hazard. You want the big payday. It comes with big pay responsibilities.
But again, it's not like he's been torn down for saying something mean to someone that was when he was having a coffee. It's not like it's gossip rag stuff like that. This is him being in a compromising position, doing something that, if alleged as it is, would be illegal. Mm-hmm. So, and again, what you do in your private time, if it is private, okay. As long as you're not hurting people or doing anything like that, okay. Pragmatically, you deal with it. I'm not, going to moralize and say that you broke the law, you need to go to jail. But if you're going to do it, make it private. This is where I disagree with Yoko. Him being a goose doing allegedly something illicit has now been made public, and now he has hurt his team. And that's where you can talk about tall poppy syndrome. That is a fair point. Australian media, alongside the British, worse in the world at it. They will build up someone just to tear him down and then start the cycle again.
100%.
We see it so often. But this isn't him being torn down for, a nothing burger. This is him being, being castigated for something that he could have easily have avoided that has hurt South Sydney.
So the discussion that was had, went into the realms about the value that's placed on the jersey that's worn, and whether players are, above the game or above the jersey that they represent. Talking about the culture of organisations like the All Blacks, where they have a jersey that's revered, and the last thing that players want to do is to bring any level of disrespect to that jersey or dishonour the jersey in any way. We're trying to come up with, clubs within the NRL that might place the same value on that as what happens in the with the All Blacks. And doesn't mean that their club is without players that make errors, but I guess case in point would be, say, the Melbourne Storm, where in terms of the players, when some of them have done the wrong thing, that they've been held to account and made to apologise and do their penance. Is that part of how you go about setting up that that sort of culture, that the jersey is paramount, and that you then end up with a situation where players from other clubs are prepared to come to a club on apparently less money because they want to come to a club that's A, a winning club, and B, where they can be better versions of themselves, be it as players or individuals. Is there any? Do you think there's anything in that?
Oh, that's the dream as a professional organisation, 100%. And Melbourne is such a fascinating example for it, because while they are probably the best example of it in the NRL, they're also in a unique situation where their players aren't subject to the same level of scrutiny in Melbourne as they would be in Sydney. You can't imagine that Brandon Smith and Cameron Munster would have escaped the spotlight the way they probably have in Melbourne with some of the shenanigans that they've quite openly been caught doing or getting in trouble with from Melbourne, that would have maybe come to light a bit earlier in Sydney. So on the one hand, 100% that's the model you want to be aspiring to cover, is the Melbourne model, where their professional systems in place do make their jersey highly aspirational. Same token, it's kind of difficult to make it 1-to-1 in Sydney, just because of how much more intense the media focus is on Sydney players. The Daily Telegraph are pretty brutal. They're not the only ones, but their Sunday gossip columns are always spotted or shush or this and whatnot, sort of pulling the strings and teasing. So I do think that is the goal. 60s. It's probably easier as a theoretical than it is as a practical, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be aspiring to do that. So I think that is where we need to aim individually for Parramatta, and I imagine that's where a lot of clubs will want to as well, because you talk about a lot of teams.
Would you put the Roosters up there in that regard, in terms of, we know that they are a club that will attract players to, people joke about the sombrero, and what's really happening with salaries, but ostensibly, they seem to be able to fit players in who are supposedly taking lower salaries to play there. Are they a club where, the messaging that comes out of there is about the players and how much they value the jersey. And
I think they'd tell you that 100%. That's what they'd tell you. And I believe at their Moore Park setup, they've got like a proper museum and kind of like it's kind of hard to describe, but I think they've got like a setup there where it sort of invokes that kind of idea of you're playing for something that's greater than you. The Roosters have this incredible history. So I'm sure the Roosters believe that. I don't think it's at the same caliber as Melbourne, or perhaps even Penrith now, who I think have obviously usurped pretty much every team in the competition as this monolith across multiple grades. But the Roosters, they're close, but they I don't know. The way Bellamy and the Storm have handled the losses of not just key players, but some of the greatest players that the game's ever seen is better than how the Roosters have handled their transition from, some of their quality classes of recent years. And it's not to say the Roosters haven't been decent in the last couple of years, but they have not been competitive the way that Penrith especially, but even Melbourne, who have navigated the losses of Cronk, Slater, Smith, the Bromwich boys. There's a whole ton of talent that's just left them. And I think it speaks to that, pride in the jersey, that aspirational, organisational, culture that they've been not just competitive, but they're now back to pushing for a premiership.
It's probably a subject that we'd love to get our teeth into a little bit more, but we've really got to press on. And Clint, I want to throw to you for the next item, and that's there's a bit of talk around a potential return of the NYC. It's certainly been something that is being investigated by the NRL. I'm in. I've got some questions about how they go about it and what they do. How would you see it?
John brought this up in the green room, and if what's being suggested is true, and they're looking at revisiting the NYC competition, I'm not a fan of this at all. And the reason for that is because if we're going to go down this path where we're going to commit a bunch of money and a bunch of resources to a second-tier competition, I prefer it would be essentially a reserve-grade NRL competition that existed, and that those games would be the curtain raisers, and so that anyone in the top 30 that you're not seeing run around in NRL each week, you still get the opportunity to see live at the ground, or alternatively, that it's being televised across our respective TV networks with whatever arrangement and deal that they organise in order to make that happen. But it's been suggested as well that a task force has been put together with the likes of Ben Ikin and a sitting NRL coach, Trent Robinson, to do the work. I would have thought that being an NRL coach was a pretty encompassing job that requires a lot of your time, attention, and resources in and of itself, let alone being on these additional task forces. Far be it from me to suggest how Trent Robinson should manage his workload. More to the point that I do wonder whether there's a potential conflict of interest, and whether there aren't other equally or even potentially better qualified people who don't have the scarcity of availability, I shall put it, that someone like Trent Robinson should have, being a full-time NRL coach. If I was the Roosters, I would prefer that his attention remains on, continuing to drive the NRL side towards first-grade premierships. There's a lot of things being suggested in this little snippet of news that's only broken in the last couple of hours that I don't initially like. And the NYC competition, I'm sure you guys will share your position on this too. It was not without its flaws, and it got reconsolidated for a couple of reasons. And I think one of those reasons is these were young guys getting a lot of attention, probably too early in their careers. What comes with that is a lot of expectation, and then subsequently it becomes the indirect feeder competition to the NRL. And what we find is a lot of those players just aren't quite ready. And by virtue of it being the indirect feeder competition, the NRL, the actual reserve grade competition, the quality of those competitions suffer significantly. We saw the New South Wales Cup quality regress significantly in the period of time that the NYC competition was running. And I know that we were sort of loosely discussing this in the green room as well, is that the Queensland Rugby League competition absolutely flourished during this period. I don't like big ideas like this just being thrown out and baited into the media. One, to get a sense of fan reaction, which is partially why it's done, but two, with the view of some arbitrary timeline on it, without it being a well thought through process. Because if we've got to go forward with this, it has to be something that lasts. It can't just be something that we go, We try it for a couple of years. Oh, that didn't work, so we'll just blow it up and stop again. Like we need to have a more medium and long-term view on these types of things. And if we're going to do it, I think that we should be doing it with a reserve grade New South Wales Cup, Queensland Cup, amalgamated reserve grade competition, not the NYC.
Yeah, I think where it failed before was in that balance, and you've addressed some of it already, Clint, in what you had to say. I think the concept of having a national youth competition in itself was, had a lot of merit towards it, as from the perspective that it put all the clubs on a similar development path to each other in terms of the players. But where it ran afoul, and you've covered some of this already in your comments, is that it received the second highest profile behind the NRL, in that it was the curtain raiser match. It had the resources pumped into it because obviously they were having to fly teams around as much as what they were flying the NRL teams around, and the draw was obviously matching, paralleling the NRL draw, so that you'd have both the NYC and the NRL players travelling to the same venues, be it interstate or over in New Zealand. Then what you had as well was that, as that was the curtain raiser match, as that was the it became the feeder competition, because why would you have a player who is, say, 20 years of age or 21 years of age, if they bring it in as a 21-year-old competition, why would you have them running around in a local park for a New South Wales Cup team when you could keep them in the higher profile NYC competition? So you had it becoming that main feeder competition, because they weren't sending the best of the younger age players to play senior football against older players as their real development and testing ground. They were going from NYC into NRL. And you can understand why, because all the resources were being pumped into the NYC rather than the New South Wales Cup or Queensland Cup. And back then, of course, there wasn't the same demands on the Q Cup as what there was on the New South Wales Cup in terms of the number of teams. So you ended up having, a stronger Q Cup that developed, and the New South Wales Cup was dying death. It was absolutely dying a death. And that's basically, there was a whole lot of factors towards the NYC finishing up, but certainly the death of senior football was featured in there, as well as just the cost of staging NYC as well. If they have an NYC again, I think they have to view it as something that,
where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, where is it going to come from? And yeah, I don't have the answer, but I agree with you. If they have it, it shouldn't be to the detriment of senior football, because the preparation for NRL football has to be and should always be developing players against developing young players against open age players. It's not good to be channeling players up from an NYC level age competition into first grade and expecting that they're going to be able to cope with it. That maybe I'm a bit dinosaur in my attitudes towards that. But John, what's your take on it?
I loved the NYC for what it was back in the day. Obviously, the Eels narrowly missed out on securing the last ever, at the time, NYC title with lost to Manly at the buzzer. Dillbags was in that team alongside a few other players that are still in the NRL. It's the lay of the land is complex now. You got the NRL, you got the NRLW, you got Cup, both New South Wales and Queensland varieties, and above all, you've got expansion coming to the game. There's provisions for teams 18 and 19 already, expected to be the Perth Bears or the Western Australia Bears, whatever they call them, and then obviously Papua New Guinea, as well as projected, I believe, New Zealand too. The game, you're talking 3 new rosters, so that's top 30s plus developments plus second-tier squads plus pathways for all those teams. You're talking, what? You're talking like in excess of 100 playing personnel for every expansion team. That's 300 more people you need to have at various levels, at just a playing roster. So I can understand why they're pushing for the NYC to try and maybe fast track and maybe monopolize talent from AFL and from rugby union and maybe even other codes, because, here's a way to get more money to young kids faster. It's lucrative, it's attractive to elite physical talent in the country, in New Zealand, and internationally even. But yeah, logistically, it just seems like such a nightmare. How do you marry this up? Because if you're making a proper NYC, or almost it's IYC now, isn't it? It'd be an international between PNG, New Zealand, and Australia, let alone maybe Fiji. You're talking about the Silktails. You need to marry it up with the NRL, which means that it goes back to being the curtain raiser, which bumps, Cup, as you guys talking about, puts Cup back on the back burner, which then hampers senior development and lets all these other different issues bleed in. So I really love NYC. I didn't want... The problem is that they made a reckless decision to push it to the too hard basket going back a few years, because it was deemed to be a cash sink and they wanted to push resources elsewhere. Classic NRL, like, let's change stuff for the sake of changing things. A few years later, we're back to talking about it. And the lay of the land's changed massively. So I don't think there is a clean solution here. It takes minds that are both far smarter than I and far more financially remunerated than I in the context of this discussion to figure it out. But I don't think you're going to have a solution that pleases everyone, because the NYC breeds problems, like you guys talked about. It promotes putting kids into this grade over Reggies. NYC by nature further exacerbates the imbalances between attack and defense, and you have a lot of flashy young players coming into the NRL who can run fast and score tries, but really struggle to adapt defensively. And yeah, on top of that, you're balancing so many different fronts now between Cup, reserve grade, they're the same things, but NRLW, Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. You're fighting so many. It's not battles on different fronts, but you're so many different incubation projects and things you're juggling, and it gets out of hand very, very quickly. So I don't know how I feel about this. I love
I was just going to say, and part of the, I guess the funding that came for being able to stage the NYC before was the sponsorship that came in for it.
Yeah, Toyota, Holden,
the broadcasting, broadcasting that came out of it.
On that note, I mean, it'd be kind of cool to have a dedicated rugby league channel that actually showed rugby league games more hours than it didn't. So that maybe Fox Sports could do something with that and actually put the rugby league channel playing rugby league games more than just reruns of shows and whatnot. So
I guess what I'd be against, John, is it cannot take the form of what it did before. So I'm for developing the best pathways system, and maybe having a national competition for players 21 years of age and under is the way to go, but it cannot go down the path that it did before, and it shouldn't happen at the expense of senior age football, which to me still remains the best preparation for young players to transition into first grade football. But again, this is probably something that we could talk at greater length on, and it will probably come up as a topic into the future, we really need to push ahead and try to wrap things up. So we'll go over the last couple of things very quickly. We've got Kyle Felt now announcing that he's going to be departing the Cowboys, joining Jay Granville in
Super
that
League.
regard.
He's becoming a saint.
Mm-hmm. So Helen.
Yes. So it's another player off to the English Super League. We've got Jared Hargraves, first game back, and is suspended for 3 weeks. So what was he? He's out for 4 weeks, and then comes back for one game, out for another 3 weeks. So
I love that this is happening, but it's about 7 years too late that this stamp down has happened on him.
I know that there are systems in place in terms of loading, and it used to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, in the older system before I did the judiciary update. But repeat infringers like Jared Hargraves make me really wonder if there should be very strict conditions on people that do the same thing over and over, rather than sitting out for another 3 weeks. Maybe it should be double the time. I understand that high tackles are a unfortunate function of the game. A lot of them aren't, or 99.9% of them aren't intentional. But laziness, bad form, just broad strike zones lead to some of these hits. But he's a repeat offender, not just this year, but historically. And like I said, Quint, it's been a bit of his sins have caught up to him this year. For whatever reason, he's getting charged more and more aggressively. But it is kind of comical to see him come back from a stint off, do the same thing, and then get the same time, or close enough to the same time.
Well, fellas, let's move from this to continuing refereeing and officiating, head scratching. We'll wrap up with how on earth do we have a scenario where once again the bunker / officials almost do the job of a judiciary and say that there were mitigating circumstances for what happened with Crichton in his shot on RTS last week. So he doesn't. We have an incident where he ends up getting a week, which might be fairly light. But during the game, he doesn't even do time in the sin bin because there were mitigating. As it turns out, there were mitigating circumstances, and that was communicated out on the it's comical. It's like although it's a different type of incident, it was like with the Panthers game against us where there was the obstruction that happened. Well, there were mitigating circumstances because he's really taken out players by accident.
Yeah,
the obstruction didn't happen. The obstruction was an accident. Therefore, because it was an accident, it didn't actually happen. What the hell?
Yeah,
what is going on?
This happened while we were recording our pregame show at the Bistro for the Broncos game, and I happened to just catch the screen as it happened, and I couldn't believe what I saw. And Roger gets up, and he is punch drunk. RTS is gone, and you see the replay because you're like, oh well, something's obviously happened. Like there's clearly been contact of his head. You don't get up with like that response without significant trauma to the head. You see the replay. It's a naked shoulder charge flush to the head. That is closer to a send-off than it is to a sin bin. And the fact that he wasn't even binned, well, conspiracy.
No, John, it wasn't that. It was mitigating circumstances.
Yeah, and have they explained what the mitigating circumstances are? Because I don't think anything can be justified for it. Crichton wasn't low. RTS wasn't falling. That was just straight up, no attempt to wrap, shoulder direct to the head. Like I said, send off more than sin bin. And the fact that he's only getting 1 week for it is also a farce. Based on some of the charges you see, well, situationally, because I'm sure there's plenty of ones that are not so extreme as well. But these sort of actions invite conspiracy theories into the game. And the Bulldogs are a great story. They're surging up the ladder. They've been in the cellar dweller or in the cellar, basement for so long. They figured it out. Great defense, potential top 4 competitors now, and you see them get away with something like that, and statistically, it's likely to just be referee cock-up because that's what the NRL is. And I actually think I saw a report about there's talk of potentially an overhaul to like Annesley's department and whatnot because the NRL is acknowledging that there are some issues there, and I hope that's true. But then again, is it better the devil you know? Because the NRL haven't gotten it right for a long time in terms of the officiating and the oversight for the officials. But yeah, the Crichton incident, absolutely wild. The fact that Annesley would come out and say that fans are wrong to be upset about the inconsistencies of the bunker because of that call is equally wild. Between that, the obstruction, just general ruck interpretations that we see week to week, game to game, play to play, the NRL is a hot mess. And yeah, he can get up there and defend decisions as much as he wants. It just makes him that much more of a clown. That is one of the worst calls this year. That was an instant sin bin, more likely to be a send off. Probably should be 2 to 3 weeks on the sideline, and that's my stance on it.
Yeah, Clint, what would you like to add as we wrap things up?
It's I agree with everything that John said there in terms of the punishment and how it should have been adjudicated. It feels like we're kind of the Chicken Little in this regard, John. We've been crying out for consistency for the better part of the last couple of years on this show, in terms of interpretation, not just in terms of offence and adjudication of those offences, but the same offences over the course of not even a couple of weeks, from week to week. It is it seems hyperbolic the way and a bit of a catch cry used across the area, but it actually is a bloody lottery. You really don't know what's going to happen each week with it, and it's if the players are out there saying it, what hopes do the fans have for interpreting and understanding it? It's controllable for the NRL. They should be getting this right, and if they can't get their controllables right, it makes me really nervous when they put out there and throw other things out there about how they want to expand the football program and bring back the NYC. Let's get what we've got right first before we worry about those types of things. Let's get what we control right first. Let's have some checks and balances in place for these things, as opposed to going out there and just throwing baiting whatever out into the media and proposing these. I'll use the phrase, almost like a sugar hit, or like a instant gratification. Just seeking that immediate positive feedback loop. Let's get these things right. Let's get our fundamentals right.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair point that we should that we can end things on, Clint, because if you're not able to get what should be non-negotiables, what should be fundamentals for the people that are playing the game and for the supporters who are putting their money into their love for the game every week, it's unfair. And we feel just as passionately about what we saw over the weekend with that decision as much as we do when we fire up when the Eels cop a bad decision. And, when we saw the farce that was the obstruction, we'd raised it the week before when it had impacted Parramatta, but it also had impacted the West Tigers. We're seeing things which should not be happening. We're seeing these things happen just before finals football, and the faith of supporters must be approaching a real low at the moment, because you talk about a lottery. I said that when some of these calls go up for Parramatta fans, we feel like, it's a lottery, all right, but it's a lottery where it's like a Powerball jackpot and we're holding a standard entry. That's how much chance we feel we've got of a call going our way. Well, we're probably not alone in some of that feeling when it comes to clubs feeling about some of these calls. So, well, fellas, John? I get the feeling we've hit the 2-hour mark tonight.
Yeah, you don't want to know. We're past that. That's in the rearview mirror, mate. We are closing in on 2:09. 10
fellas,
seconds,
look.
9 seconds to 2:09. Yeah, it's coming.
Well, what can I say? I mean,
Well,
a huge,
big
massive
news.
thank you
For
going into.
I was going to say, big podcast, huge coaching appointments, big drama in the NRL. So understandably a lot to talk about. And yeah, we love to ramble.
Well, we've gone into overtime. And I'm sorry, fellas, I can't pay anything for going into overtime. I can't pay myself for going into overtime. So, but again, dedication above and beyond, fellas. So thank you for that. Thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. Thank you to Parramatta Leagues Club, who will be hosting us on Saturday from midday for our preview podcast in the bistro. Special guest in all likelihood is going to be John Muggleton, our final live appearance in the club for the season. We're getting it done at midday so that you'll be able to get over to the NRLW kickoff, which happens at 1:45. So we should have it all wrapped up before then, so you can head over to the club, to the ground from the club. So we'll see you there. Thank you to our listeners, all of you who have stuck with us, especially for this massive 2-hour plus podcast. And just one thing that we ask as well, with whatever platform you're listening on, if you can give it a like, a subscribe, it helps with all of the algorithms that are happening out there with social media and platforms. And it just means that our podcast gets out there to as a suggestion to as many rugby league followers and especially as many Parramatta followers as possible. We'll keep spreading the word of the Cumberland Throw and what we're doing to support the Eels. And fellas, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.